Hi everyone, and welcome to ZooMods Plus. ZooMods Plus is your place to find all sorts of ZOO and Joomla customizations, elements and components. If this is your first time here, please like and subscribe to get more tips and tricks that will help you develop better ZOO websites. Today, I'm going to show you how to build a ZOO element from scratch. The element will be called icon, and will simply display an icon on the front end. The element will be similar to the icon from UTheme Pro. During the development, I'll explain the files you need for an element, how to use custom configurations and layouts, and what functions you have at your disposal as a ZOO developer. My hope is that by the end of the video, you'll be able to develop your own ZOO elements with ease, and you'll never be stuck for any functionality you need when building a ZOO-powered website. So, let's get started. Here I have a brand new Joomla website set up on my localhost. It has a brand new copy of ZOO installed with the demo content loaded. Here are the files. Our new element is going to exist inside the Elements folder in the root of the ZOO Media folder. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a folder for the element. Let's call our element Icon. The folder needs two files, an XML manifest file and a PHP file. Any of you who have developed a Joomla plugin or module will be familiar with the XML file. The XML is the file that tells ZOO about our element, and the PHP file will contain all our business logic. Let's start by getting the XML out of the way. In the XML, we're simply going to give the element a name, some copyright information, and a description. The XML is where we will define the configuration parameters for our element, but we'll come back to this later. So now we have the XML defined, let's set up the basic element PHP code. This should be just enough to get our ZOO app to recognize that we have a new element. First, we set a new element class. Then we add some of the inherited functions to prevent the element from erroring. Now if we go into the ZOO configuration and we have a look at the available elements, you can see that our new element is right there and ready to use. Of course, our element doesn't do anything yet, but that's about to change as we go ahead and develop some of our PHP business logic. On all basic ZOO elements, there are a number of methods your PHP class must have. The first one is hasValue. This method tells ZOO if the element has any value and whether it should render in the front end. Remember, ZOO layout positions don't show if the elements inside that position have no value. This method needs to return true for the element to show in the front end. For now, we'll simply return true. Later we'll add some logic in here that will test if the element's value is set. The next method is the render method. This is what gets rendered in the front end. For now, I want to return a string to let us know if the element is working. The next method is edit. This is where we set the backend form. This method uses a lot of ZOO specific logic to work, and I'll go into more detail on this later. For now, I'll return false. The next method is render submission. This method renders the front end form. Yes, ZOO allows us to render the backend form field in a different way from the front end form field. We'll get into this later. For now, let's return false. The last method is validate submission. This method allows us to make sure that the front end submitted data is valid. This advanced method is beyond the scope of this video, so I will address this in a later tutorial. For now, simply return true. Now let's have a look at the render method and set up the element in our view and test that everything is working as it should. As you can see, the string in our render method is rendered successfully to the front end. So now our element is hooked up to our front end, we can begin coding the logic into the element. Okay, so now let's set up some backend options. We do this with the edit method. To begin with, let's simply add a text field. Eventually we'll make this a select drop-down to select the icon, but for now we can simply make a text field to show how this is hooked up. It's at this point we use some of the ZOO system magic that I mentioned earlier. ZOO gives us some cool HTML helpers that come in handy when rendering backend fields. Quick note here to say that we don't need to use these magic methods, but it helps keep everything neat and bug-free. To render a simple text field in the backend edit, simply call this app HTML underscore. This function takes 4 arguments. The first is the type of field you want to render. In this case, it's text, so we enter control.text. The next three arguments are the name of the field, the value of the field, and the last one is a string that describes the typical text field attributes. In the name argument, we need to call another ZOO property. This code specifies the name of the field, so we use getControlName to set the name of the field. ZOO will remember this name and allow us to call the value later when we render. In the value argument, we use this get, and we reuse whatever name key we used in getControlName. In fact, we can use this getName anywhere in the element code to get the stored value. So let's check that out in the backend, and here you see the backend field we've specified. Okay, so let's save a value here and see if we can get that value rendered in the front end. To do this, we have to go back to the render method. Now that we have a value set via the edit method, we can call that value in the render method once we have a value stored. So in the render method, we simply return this get, then the name of the control. Okay, so let's check that out, and as you can see, we have an element that behaves like the default text element. Okay, so that's an extremely basic ZOO element. Let's make it a bit more functional. We can now do a little bit more with the backend editing. Rather than the simple text field in the backend, let's have a drop-down select box with a few of the UIKit icons for the user to choose from. First, let's change the edit method in our class. Again, ZOO provides us with handy HTML helpers to make the code cleaner. So instead of control.text, we change that to select.genericList. If you're wondering what these magic HTML functions are, then check out the written tutorial that comes with this video, link in the description. This method actually takes a few more arguments. The next argument takes an array that makes up the values in the dropdown. It's recommended to be an associative array, so let's create the array. As you can see, I'm building a small ASOC array with the name and value pair of a few of the UIKit icons. This array then gets sent into our GenericList magic method. The next argument is getControlName. Then we give our attributes, and the last method takes the current selected value. We simply put this, get, then whatever key name we give the control. Now let's check out the backend edit. Now you can see we have a drop-down with the values in the array. Let's select the value and check out the front end. As you can see, the front end is still echoing out the value we selected. It's a bit ugly at the moment, so let's get some working markup in the render method to make this look correct. So back in the render method, we can simply return a string like this, with our value wrapped in UIKit markup, and this will render out the icon. We can now change the value in the backend, and this will update our front end view. As we can see, if I change the value and save, the icon will now change in the front end. Cool, we're actually getting somewhere. Okay, now the fun begins. What if we wanted to give the admin the ability to choose an icon size? We use the parameters for this. We set our parameters in the XML manifest. There are two sets of params in any given element. One is the main element params and the other is the render params. The main params are the ones you set when you first create the element in the backend. The render params are the params that are controlled inside the layout settings. Since we're setting the size, which is a visual attribute, let's control that via the render params. In the XML, create a node called params and give it an attribute of group equals render. Inside this node, we can have as many parameter fields as we need. For this element, we only need one, size. This will be a drop-down list, so enter a new node called param. Give it an attribute of name equals size, type equals list, default equals 1, and label equals size. Inside the list node, we can set our option nodes just like we would with a HTML select dropdown. Okay, now that we have some options, we need to feed the values back into the render method if we want to use them in the front-end view. So back in the render method, we create the params using params equals this, app, data, create params. Now we can access our params using params get, then input the name of the param. In our case, this is size. Now we need to change the markup here to allow the icon to change its size. Okay, so now when we change the size parameter, the icon will change size. Okay, so that's the element working. Now let's do some housekeeping. We need to put some logic into the hasValue method to make sure the element has a value before rendering. This is a simple bit of logic. Simply return this get, then our control key name. This get function will return false if no value is stored and return true when we have a value. With that done, let's tidy up our render method while at the same time showing you how the element template system works. Right now, the render method returns the HTML directly. For a simple element like our icon element, this is usually okay, but for larger, more complex elements, you're going to want to bring your markup into a separate template file and then tell the render method where to go to find your front-end markup. First, let's create a folder named tmpl, and inside this, we create a PHP file named render.php. After we've input the Joomla security call, we can input our markup from the render method. Now we can tell the render method to go get the template. To do this, we use the render layout function. This function takes two arguments. One is the layout path, and the other is an array of variables we send into the view. It's good practice to wrap this in an if block, and test to see if the layout file is present. To show how we send variables into the view, let's send the size and value variables into the view via the second argument, like this. Now in our template file, the size and value variables are available. So that's how we use template files. Note we can also do some cool customizations on the backend edit view by doing the same with the edit method. Okay, so that's the basic icon element. You can get the code in the written tutorial on zoomodsplus.com and on the GitHub repo. All the links are in the description. If you found this video useful, please click like to help the channel grow. I plan on making a lot more ZOO and Joomla tutorials soon, so make sure you subscribe to get all the updates. If you have any ideas for videos you'd like me to make, please contact me or leave a comment. See you next time.